Welcome to the Win, Make, Give podcast. Chad Hyams here, flying sort of solo this week. That's right, folks. You know my partner, Bob Stewart, and you know he does this to me regularly. That's go on vacation, do a crappy job with his schedule, screw things up, and leave me on my own with you. Yet you know you look forward to these episodes. You know you love Bob Stewart. Yet you sit there and say, ooh, I secretly hope Bob's not there so Chad can interview somebody and we can get really down into the nitty gritty and not worry about the cool things on the guy's shelf that Bob's always asking about. No, Bob, we miss you. We love you. We hope you're doing whatever it is you're doing. I am being joined today by someone who I've had the chance to know for about 3 minutes, and I'm already ready to know this guy a lot better. We've realized we don't live too far. There will probably be a coffee in the near future. And folks, I want to bring my new friend onto this conversation to talk with you, and that is Tim Jai Baker. Welcome to the Win, Make, Give podcast.
Chad, thanks for having me on your show today. I appreciate it.
I'm looking forward to it. Now, those who, you know, they don't see the notes, they don't see the paper that are sent to me about you and stuff like that. And it's Tim quote, right? I'm throwing the air quotes up there, everybody. Jai Baker. Before we get into anything, that is the coolest nickname or whatever it. Where the heck does that come from? Because that's not some form of Timothy. That's not. So I got to ask you, what's Jai? Where did it come from?
Well, obviously, it's not my birth name. But in 2005, I was considering taking a temple tour with Dr. Deepak Chopra to India the following year. I also signed up to do a meditation retreat with him in that same year called Secrets to Enlightenment. And this was around about April. About a month went by and I decided to cancel the temple tour to India. It was 2 weeks long. It was going to be 20 people from Europe and the United States. And I thought I was too important to leave my clients for 2 whole weeks. And so I canceled it. September 2nd of 2000 came along and I lost my 21-year-old daughter to an auto wreck.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
And the temple tour got put back on my calendar. So I had to, I just wanted to process life, everything that had happened, both personally, career-wise, family-wise. And so I go to India. It was, we visited 5 cities in South India, the Tamil Nadu region. And we also had dinner one night with the Prince of Tanjore in his palace, greeted by a fire parade, conversations with the prince, and belly dancers to a 5-course dinner, toured the palace. But while I was in Tiruvannamalai, which is the largest temple in South India, Tiruvannamalai, or the temple, is at the base of Mount Arunachala. On the other side of Mount Arunachala is the Sri Bhagavan Ramana Maharshi Ashram.
My gosh, you can't say that 5 times fast.
Actually, I think I might, because the Indian dialect is friendly to my ear for some reason. I don't know why. But I woke up one morning at 4 a.m. I did a 2-hour meditation, and I'm walking down this long path to the ashram for breakfast. Along the way were some breakfast vending carts on the right side that you would see in New York City, and across from them were a group of men in these orange robes. They're called sadhus. They've renounced materialism. And it could be a 46-year-old attorney, a wife, 6 kids. He goes home one night and says, after tomorrow, you'll never see me again. And they just try to live off the land.
Wow.
Well, these guys need some help every now and then, especially in the early going. So I went over there and I gave these guys money so they could get breakfast that morning. And then I went on down the path for my breakfast. And this one little guy comes running up behind me, came up to about my chin, bald-headed, big smile. He put his hands in prayer. He said, thank you. He says, I name you Jai. I said, Jai? He says, yes, in Hindu, Jai means victory. Today was my victory. You gave me food. And then he put this holy ash on my forehead. And then I had a visit with him for the next day and a half at the ashram. So that's where Jai comes from, and it stayed with me ever since.
That's fantastic. What a story, right? And what a place to get a nickname, right? So many of us have a nickname or a handle that came from maybe, you know, high school when someone was making fun of us or someone was just shortening our name. No, you get to walk around every day being called Victory. I mean, that's pretty powerful way anytime somebody reaches out to Jai. Now, folks, you might have listened to that introduction, and I didn't know the story. Believe me, we didn't share it before. That's not what even got you on this call, right? I mean, I hear what you're talking about, and I know some of the stuff I'm going to ask you about from some of your information, your book, your website that I've done some research on that we'll get into. Yet you come from a completely different field that I don't think anybody would guess. If I said time out right now, folks, guess what industry Jai was involved in? Jai, give everybody I don't read bios. Everyone knows that here on When Make Give. Just introduce yourself now that they know your nickname, story, and origin. Let's hear the rest of you. Who are you?
Oh, well, I went through an exercise with Dr. Chopra with that very question with another person, and he lets you take 10 minutes to go through who are you. So you start at your ego, and then eventually everybody gets to their light, their consciousness, their God. But in this physical plane, in 1981, I started out in the insurance field. I learned how the insurance watch was made, spent several years with a financial planning firm, learned that watch. It was actually in the infancy of the financial planning industry. And then for 8.5 years, I was with a regional Wall Street firm learning the Wall Street watch. I had decided that the only way I was going to be able to control the outcome and quality of experience that my clients had would be to develop my own firm. And in 1997, I started my own practice as a multi-generational financial planning firm with just me and an assistant. And through the years, I used my client meetings as a laboratory. It was a feedback loop of hearing from them what else they needed for me to provide for them to enrich this wealth journey experience they were having. And so through the years, I hired a CPA, I hired another CPA on staff, I brought in an attorney on staff, I had 2 other wealth advisors. And before I left that firm and I sold it to my colleagues, I brought in an Ayurvedic practitioner for mind, body, spirit work. So we're fee-only advisors. I was working with 155 families, managing about 400 million in assets, and 80% of my clients were either doctors or execs at hospitals or hospitals themselves. And I took a 3-year sabbatical. I was consulting with my firm for a year, but they didn't need me. The next year, I told people I was writing a book, but I wasn't. And then the third year, that story got old, and I finished writing a book called The Awakened Investor that came out on Amazon Thanksgiving a year ago. And along the way, my energy just shifted, and I have recreated what I did before, but as a virtual multifamily office service offering in a much more expanded way.
Okay, so folks, if you missed it, as he was saying all of that, we're going to talk about it again. He wrote a book, right? So you can find Jai Baker's book, The Awakened Investor. You can find it on Amazon. Pick this up because we're talking to a guy today. And folks, you might have noticed we don't have too many wealth people on the Win Make Give podcast because we have the wealth series for you. Ben created for you a wealth program for you to follow. I highly recommend, if you haven't gone through Wealth 2.0, you scroll back, find the Wealth 2.0 series, and you pay attention, or just go to winmakegive.com/wealth. We'll send you right to where you need to go. We did a 17 episode series on wealth. So we don't usually bring in wealth people, but when I was introduced to Jai, he was more than a wealth person, right? I get requests all the time for people to come on our show to talk about how you can make $1 million and you can make $1 million. It was Jai when we looked that it's not just about the wealth. It is the holistic approach, as you mentioned, to a person we've talked about. Folks, if you're near a computer while I'm talking to Jai right now, listening to this, go to the website luminouswealth.com. That's his website. You'll be able to find more there and all of that. But if you just go to his main site, main page, and scroll about, I'm going to say 3 scrolls down, you're going to come to this wheel that is built to show us the 8 aspects to holistic wealth, as Jai has. And we're going to dive into this. Jai, I want to start. There's 8 things on this wheel, but the center of the wheel is your logo. And I asked you about that when we got on the call. I said, Was it a compass and we've got a W instead of a north because of wealth? Was it a target we're shooting for with wealth at the middle? And you said to me, no, it's an ancient symbol. Can you tell me any more about the symbol? Because it just seems to, if I count the segments, it seems to have 8, right? It seems to be
Yes.
exactly what would go with what you're talking about. And I love when logos actually matter. They're not just some letters scribbled out. Can you take 2 or 3 minutes and just talk about this artifact and how it applied to you?
Sure. Well, actually, my spiritual advisor on our team, lifestyle coach, came up with that symbol, and she created it. It's very ancient. It's very strong, and that it's a metal. And if you look in the very details of it, it almost looks like there's 4 people there around the outside of that, almost like a lambert looking symbol. And it looks like they have their arms stretched out, all connecting with each other.
Yep.
But also, to your point, it does give you rise to thinking it could be a labyrinth, which is a technique that people use to find inner peace in that walk around a labyrinth. And they do that very intentionally. What's interesting, you brought up something right when you were introducing me, and that people wouldn't know what field I'm in based on the story I was telling about Jai. For many, many years, I've gone to a lot of spiritual retreats. And, that could be from 2 days long to 2 weeks long. And, and and I never ask anybody what they do. I just talk about them, who they are, what they like, their family, and so forth. But usually after 2 or 3 days, somebody will come to me and say, well, what do you do? And so I talk about being in the wealth management industry. And the first thing that almost to the person they always say to me is, how can you be associated with wealth when you're so spiritual? And so my reply is always, well, that tells me more about you than it does about me,
Interesting.
because there is no disconnect. But that does tell you the perception that people in America have about money. They have a poor relationship with money.
Yes.
I mean, we represent 4.2% of the global population. We've created 62% of the world's wealth, and we have a problem with money. So there's many aspects as to why that's true. It could be the delivery system that we have in our society to consumers. But it really gets back to a more causal reason, and that's the fact that people are living their day-to-day lives in this 5 senses skin encapsulated bag of bones, and they have no idea that there's a non-physical aspect of themselves that's far greater and more powerful. And if they would just tap into that and use that, they could use all of these resources that we have, including money. But to your point, money is not just the elephant in the room, it's the room itself. And a way that we've taken to right size that is to show that it's just one of 8 major aspects of who we are in our life. And so I had almost 4 decades of what I call evidence-based wealth management, which covers the finances segment of these aspects. And what I've done is I've married that with the blue zone research that's available. And this is the cultures around the world that have the longest longevity and the highest quality of lives. And that's where these 7 other aspects come into play that turn into our 8 arenas approach of managing wealth. So now we can start to right size where money is in our life, because all of these aspects are interconnected. Your health can affect your finances. Your relationships can affect your estate planning choices with your heirs. Your emotional intelligence can affect all of those aspects. And so that's why we find that we can't just focus on one area. We have to give balance to all of it.
And it's powerful, and you've taken me now. I've got like so many questions, right, from all that you just said. But let's look at this diagram that's on your website, folks. Again, if you're near a computer, go to luminouswealth.com. If not, go check it out later. Grab this image. So the outside circle around the whole thing that kind of, in my opinion, and of course it's your diagram, so please talk about it, but the thing that kind of comes around everything here is that spirituality, because it is in all of these areas that we're talking about. It's kind of the thing that holds this whole picture together. Am I interpreting how you've laid this out correctly in the world of spirituality?
You are. I actually came up with that kind of design. I've never seen it before. If it's out there, I apologize that, I'm trying to take some credit for that.
Nope.
But you always see spirituality as another slice of the pie.
Yes.
And what I wanted people to realize is that spirituality affects all the other 7 aspects of us to 100%. I mean, it just soaks into every aspect that we have there, from finances to mindfulness to physical health to nutrition, diet. Home aesthetics would be your environment, self-care, and then social interactions along with relationships.
And we're going to dive into each of those, folks. You don't have to have scribbled those down going, wait, what were those? I'm going to ask Jai for like 2 minutes in each one of these so we get some stuff. But I'm going to put you in a hot seat for a second with this question. I don't know what your religious beliefs are, and we don't have to answer that. But we know you've also now experienced the Indian culture and what's happening there, the spirituality of that. Can I put you in the hot seat to say, what's the difference? Because I don't want people to be like, well, forget it. He's just thumping a Bible or something. What's the difference, religious from spirituality?
All the religions are like rivers flowing into the ocean of spirituality.
Oh, I
And
like that.
To me, they're portals into spirituality, into the omnipresent consciousness of our universe. And I support everyone's practice of those religions if that's what they're aligned with. What I always say though is that most people aren't practicing those religions that they say they have a belief in. And what I say is you have to live those. If you would just live those religious beliefs 24/7, they would work for you and everybody else. You would change the world. But you can't do this part time. I mean, you can't. We would have never heard of Tiger Woods if he played weekend golf growing up.
That's an excellent point. An excellent
and so I support all of these different portals to light. And
wow.
I grew up a Methodist. My mom was a 21-year Methodist Sunday school teacher who never missed a Sunday in those 21 years. And then I entered my own portal of light, and I practiced that through a meditation technique every morning for about an hour and a half.
Ooh, folks, that's stepping up your meditation. From those of you out there who are saying, Chad, I can sit still for a minute.
Well, yeah. So like everything else, it's hard till it's not, because that's usually the comment that's made to me. Well, I can't do that. Well, you can do it, but it's hard till it's not.
I like that. It's hard until it's not. Remember that, folks. All right. So, Jai, you quickly stated what the 7 areas are that are within the spirituality enclosure. I'm just going to use that term here because they all tie to it. Give me a 2-minute conversation. We'll just start at the top on mindfulness. Some of these, our audiences, certain people are probably very good at. Some of us are challenged with. But you're talking about wealth through a holistic approach. So when you say mindfulness, tell me more.
It's just nudging people to become consciously aware of their choices, aware of who they are, aware that they're more than this material matter, that there is a non-physical aspect of who they are. I mean, it gets into the techniques that there's tools that you can use to be mindful, but it's basically emotional intelligence. Most of us operate from that reptilian mind. The amygdala takes over. That fight, flight, or freeze state happens when we are reacting to some kind of danger, and we're always surveying our surroundings for danger. And danger could be your workmate. It could be, your work. It could be many other people in your life. So we're in this constant low stress area, and we just need to wake up to that and become consciously aware of these issues. So emotional intelligence will affect those reactionary choices, usually not in a good way. We're not making good choices when we hear the market is down.
Yep.
And so, but if you are responding to your environment, now you're controlling your environment. You can control your environment because you've predetermined what you're going to do, what actions are going to be taking when those certain environmental events show up.
Yep. Okay.
But if you haven't done that, you're always in this reactionary mode and you're not going to make good choices.
Okay. And that, right. I mean, you hear sale, right? And it's like, great, it's 50% off, but it's still 50% more than you were going to spend that morning because you weren't being mindful as you walk into that stuff. It's all of that. Now, the next one, I'm just going to go in order around the circle from there. The next one's one of my favorite topics, physical health. How does that all tie in from your perspective?
Well, it's just the quality of life, right?
Sure.
You don't want to be in a wheelchair, but if you are, you want to love being in a wheelchair. So I have empathy with everyone who has these physical difficulties in their life. But, we want, there's a statement that a Dr. Alberto Villoldo has made. He wrote a book called How to Grow a New Body. He's Cuban by birth, anthropologist by training, and he's a shaman, lives in Chile and teaches other people to be shaman. But his statement is your health span should equal your lifespan. Meaning, as we begin to chronologically age in life, we don't have to fall into what the herd is wanting us to do with the walking canes. And then you go to these groups and you do these certain things, and then your quality of life starts to fade away. That you can be vibrant every day of your life with your health and well-being right up to the day that you pass. It's interesting, in my own family, I haven't had family that had long-term infirmities. My dad just got up one night in the middle of the night, went to the restroom, and he just collapsed in bed, and he really never had any major life health issues. He could still drive a car, make his breakfast, and go watch the Masters golf tournament in Augusta National.
There you go. I mean, we've been joking on the podcast because my wife and I recently moved into a 55 and above community. Now I'm only 53, so someone has to figure that out. I'm not going to explain how that could be possible because I would never say that about my wife. Yet there are 75-year-olds kicking my butt on the pickleball court every day. They have definitely not just fallen into the physical health path that they were supposed to because they just happen to be 75. All right, next up would be diet or nutrition. You used that term when we went around last time. That's going to obviously tie into physical health just as a separate piece of that. Is there anything additional about diet everybody should hear as we're holistic wealth creating?
Well, you had 14 or 17 series episode on wealth management. You could do double that on diet and nutrition in the United States because we've poisoned our food system. Everything's processed food. And even when you think you're getting something organic, you find out later that 60 days before the harvest of whatever that is, they could still put pesticide and treatments on it.
Right.
So diet is half of everything. And so you have to be totally mindful about what you're putting in your body. Coffee in the morning is not breakfast.
Okay.
And so you have to have a diet that resonates with your geographical surroundings. People in the Caribbean will have a different kind of diet nutrition than people in India, than people in Canada. So some people's diets may be more meat eaters and some people may be more vegetarian. So it's really according to your own local acumen and your DNA. But it's super important in order to maintain a very high quality of life and living.
That's really interesting that you say that. I've never really thought about it like that. And then you did the Blue Zone research, and from the Blue Zone research that I'm aware, it's not like they're all in one place. So it's not saying you have to have a vegetarian diet or something like that because and I don't remember the city off the top of my head, but I know Italy has a blue zone out there. You can be sure they're eating pasta, folks, right? So your diet is very interesting when it comes to that, being holistic in that. All right.
Well, and nutrition and mindfulness, those two are 90% of chronic disease, dis-ease in America is based on what you put in your mouth and what you think with your thoughts.
Oh, I like that. Can you say that again?
90% of chronic diseases or diseases are caused by what you put in your mouth and what you think with your thoughts.
Folks, I hope you got that. I didn't just ask him to repeat it because, I thought he stuttered or stumbled through the words there. I wanted him to say that again so it hits you all between the eyes. What a great message right there. All right, let's keep going.
And so a lot of people have asked me through the years, how do we bring down healthcare costs in the United States?
We move.
No, we don't need it. So, develop mindfulness, emotional intelligence, have a great nutrition, have great thoughts, have great things you're putting in your mouth. We won't need that system very much.
My friend Ryan Gregg's a great example of that message you're saying right there. All right, next on your circle, you got social interactions. Jai, talk to me a little about how that fits into our holistic wealth picture.
Well, I incorporate relationships into that as well.
Okay.
And actually, Harvard did a study, and their study was to find out from our human experience here, what is the single most meaningful thing in this human experience before we transition to the next phase of life. And what they found out is relationships is that most meaningful aspect of who we are. So that's what we work on with our social interactions and what we nurture in that area of work.
Yeah, folks, a really, really, really wealthy person that dies just leaves a lot of money for the government to take. Someone who has wealth in the area of relationships, they leave a legacy when they move on. So
absolutely.
Okay, next you've got self-care on this. I think this is an area that sadly most people miss. Talk to us a little about self-care in our holistic approach.
Well, I experienced the lack of that last year about this time.
Okay.
I decided after all these years of having these degrees, designations, and experience that I needed another one. and so through the Investment Wealth Institute, I took a course and Certified Private Wealth Advisor designation, CPWA, offered through Yale. And they said to study for a year, take the exam. There was 250 hours of lectures and I don't know how many thousands of questions that I went through, and then PowerPoints and information and other books. But after 4 months, I decided I'm not going to be able to retain all this information for a whole year. I'm going to take this exam now. But in those 4 months, because I was so intense day to day of doing, I wasn't doing my meditations with the consistency that I normally was. My nutrition went into the crapper. And
you were out of balance.
I was way out of balance. Oh my God. And my partner at the time and I, at the end of that period, had a massive blow up with each other. And so and that's what is so important about all these aspects is that we stay in balance with this. It allows us to bring homeostasis back to all 60 trillion cells in our body and keep it in balance.
It's a great experience and great story right there to understand how easy it is to get so focused on one thing that everything else in this wheel falls along the wayside, even though you know them so well. It's your wheel, right? And and then your meditation was gone, your physical health, your nutrition, all the areas.
I wasn't working out.
Right. And your social interactions were suffering because you were so into the studying. Yeah, it's so easy to get there. Okay, the next one, I was very curious what you meant by it. You threw a hint what you meant by it. I think it's one of the most important things that most people overlook once you've explained it, because it happened to be the first chapter of my book that I made sure we covered. You have here homesthetics, which you described earlier as our environment. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, So my teammate and lifestyle coach is expert in feng shui. And so
Okay.
she could go far deeper than what I'm going to share with you here. But for me in my own life, home aesthetics or my environment, my surroundings, um, I cherish. And so I want beautiful things around me. I want a clean space. I want it organized. Um, my kids used to joke with me. They go, I said, why don't you want to make up your bed? And they go, well, I want my room to look like it's lived in.
Okay.
And he says, they would say, you want our rooms to look like a museum. I go, well, if the Queen of England is going to come visit you tomorrow morning, what would you do? They go, well, we make up our bed. I go, well, the Queen of England is coming to our house every day from now on. But no, for me, it's important. I also love art. And so I have these things that through my years and travels and whatnot, I've been able to accumulate, and it brings joy and personality and memories to my days. And so it's uplifting. You want a clean mind, an organized mind, a clear mind, and one that reflects your birthright of joy and contentment. And that is a birthright.
And I can see it looking around you, right, folks? We see each other as we're talking. I can see the beautiful pieces you have around you, and some of them aren't small, right? Some of those pieces on the wall behind you look quite large, but that room looks very calm and peaceful at the same time, and it looks like it's going to bring you much joy when you would walk into a room like that. As I can see, there's probably things that have specific memories to you. They're not just big pieces. We just talked about it on the last podcast that Bob and I recorded. And folks, remember, Dave controls when these drop. So this might not come out right. How important decluttering actually is to have that clean, that less stress from all the stuff. And you have plenty of stuff in there, but it definitely does not have a cluttered feel to it. So, folks, for your holistic wealth, keep your home aesthetics in mind. The last one here, it's probably the obvious one as we get to it, right? For a holistic wealth picture, we actually have finances. So, talk to me a little bit about it. And I'm going to throw a specific question I want you to hit at as we're getting near the end of it. You talked earlier in passing about the horrible relationship we here, specifically in America, we've got people listening from all other places, but specifically in America, the horrible relationship we have with money. Um, so as you're talking about this holistic piece of finance to close out the puzzle, what are some of those things we can do to create a thriving relationship with money? Take us down that path here as we get near the end, Jai.
So the financial system is a muddied landscape for most people. It lacks integrity, lacks morality. It's very fragmented, and we're usually working with people who are commission-based people, one way or the other. Only 1 out of 10 people are true fee-only advisors. They may say they're fee-only on their websites. You dig into their SEC ADV forms, it explains all of what they do and any conflicts of interest, and it will say in there at some point, oh, by the way, we also have our insurance licenses, and that could create a conflict of interest in earning commissions on our advice giving. So most people in America run around separately getting investment advice or services, sometimes with more than one investment entity. They separately then buy insurance contracts through several people through the years who've never talked to the estate planning attorney. They separately go to the CPA firm who's never talked to the investment guy except at tax time when there's a missing 1099 that's needed. Only 1/3 of people actually do a financial plan, and less than that do it very correctly, and very few follow that up on an ongoing basis. And certainly nobody's talked to the spiritual advisor. So we physically run around taking the most time to get all these services, spending the most money for them. And everybody in that grouping wants to be the quarterback of that family. They want to be the one in charge. And so when an idea comes up from the other teammates, then they're usually shot down. The family is usually always in mistrust of the total advice that they're receiving from these individuated members of their own financial team. And so what I wound up doing in my career was bringing that team all in-house, where we're following the mission statement of our families and we're philosophically aligned. Now, we can be collegially challenging each other with ideas and strategy for the client, but at the end of the day, there's going to be one best strategy for a client that's going to be provided and then implemented. But for me, the investment guy has to be joined at the hip with the tax preparer, because most of that work has to be done back in November and December. They can't do much about their 2024 year now in January of 25 or in April of 25.
Right.
And so for me, there was no one component or member of my professional team that was any more magically different than what you could get in the marketplace. What was the magic was all of these people were in the same location talking to each other throughout the year about the client that they're working with.
Interesting. Okay. Love it. Folks, we've been talking to Tim Jai Baker. We're not done. I got one more question for him. So, hang on, but I'm going to throw the pitch stuff in here. You can check out his book, The Awakened Investor, on Amazon. Again, Awakened Investor, Tim Jai Baker. And you can check out luminouswealth.com. Find out more about him, his organization. You can connect through him through the website if you had something specific you wanted to talk to him about. Jai, let me ask this closing question. If you could answer one question that I didn't ask, or if you could go back and restate something you said, whatever you think's the most important, what's the last thought you want to be leaving our audience with today?
So most people go to a cocktail party and they ask somebody there at the cocktail party, what's your investment guy's hot stock tip?
Okay.
And we know in our industry that, these individual stocks is like gambling. Diversification is a free lunch because you're going to get all the returns of the marketplace in that. And you're going to do it with a less volatile way of managing your resources. You buy one stock and you're going to pick up 2 to 3 times as much volatility, and you may not even get the return of the basket of stock. So what I want the key question to be when people go to cocktail parties is, who's your advisory team? Let's start doing the things that make a critical difference in our wealth lives, instead of trying to go on these one-off shoot for the stars, roll the dice at Vegas, trying to achieve our life goals. Let's do it strategically, smartly, with a multidisciplinary team of advisors that's aligned with our interests, because they're our fiduciaries.
And folks, it's not just about the financial piece, right? It's a holistic wealth that you're creating that Jai has clearly been talking about today on the call. Jai, I appreciate you taking the time, sharing a little more, sharing some of those stories that you've gotten there. Folks, not a bad nickname to have, right? May you all wake up and each and every day remember that whatever the name you're going by is, may victory be there for you. Until our next episode, as always, do good.